So I started Nuevo Sol, British Latinx Writers, with the Argentinian poet Leo Boix, because for a very long time, 20 years, I worked in literature and I did not see a single Latinx person on a mainstream literature platform. And I kept waiting and waiting and thinking, mi gente va a venir, and they never came. So Leo and I thought, right, we're going to have to do something about this. And we started a program called Invisible Presence, which was more community-based. It was some fantastic writers that we're still in touch with. And then we moved forward and we put together an anthology, Un Nuevo Sol, which has amazing writers, including Maia and Leo. And at that point, we started doing collaborations and we started doing international work and all sorts of exciting things. I would like to also say that we do celebrate and, you know, are very, very supportive and in awe of those Latinx writers in Britain who choose to write in Spanish. I know that there's some of you here. Consuela, I think you're here. I see that Eduardo Embry and Isabel del Rio will also be reading later. And we do know that there have been many years of people writing in Spanish. But we chose to write in English. And the reason that we did that is because there's this incredible linguistic and cultural richness of moving between those cultures, between those identities. And I think you're going to see that very much in the readings that are going to come. So I wouldn't want to say that one is instead of the other, they go together. And I think it's just a really beautiful thing. I also wanted to say that we were really keen to inspire the British general public to know more about Latin culture and to know more about British Latinx community. And for that, we felt that writing in English, albeit with Spanglish, with bits of Portuguese and Quechua and all sorts of other things, was the way forward to do that. And we've had a wonderful response to that. And also, of course, the more that we delve into finding new writers, we discovered a lot of second and third generation British Latinx people who maybe did not speak Spanish perfectly. I certainly don't. I came over from Argentina as a baby. And there are a lot of us now in the UK who, although maybe we can understand perfectly, we don't necessarily write it as fluently as we do English, but we do navigate between these hemispheres, between these languages. So that's another reason that we were really, really excited to start working in English. So today I'm very excited because I'm introducing three of my favorite British Latinx poets. And it's particularly exciting because they all have new books and collections. So it's really quite a golden age moment for British Latinx writers. We're going to have a big event at the South Bank on the 30th and another event on November 30th at the Roundhouse, when you'll be seeing these wonderful people again. So if you want to hear more, just please do keep following us. So to start with, we have, as I said, British Argentinian poet, translator and educator Leo Boix. He has already published 2 collections in Spanish. He is a Complete Works Fellow. He developed a completely different voice for his English language poetry, which I think is quite unique, and published an amazing collection, Ballad of Happy Immigrant with Chatto Windus, which has received really major international acclaim. It was absolutely lovely to see big seminars and events happening around his collection in the United States. And there's another big one coming up in the UK. He was also the winner of the Keats-Shelley Prize and is altogether an extraordinary person who is also the co-director of Nuevo Sol. So he has to put up with me a lot, which is why he's not smiling that much. And then we've got the fantastic Andrés Nicolás Ordorica, who has both Scottish and Mexican roots and many other wondrous things. His debut collection, at least this I know, is going to be published with 404 Inc. He's one of those extraordinary writers who works across forms, and he's actually just been shortlisted for the Mo Siocharan Prize for fiction, which is from Hachette. So yeah, big clap. So we're incredibly excited. I do find actually it's quite common with Latinx writers that they can move across forms and across languages and all that sort of thing. So that's a really beautiful thing. I think it's the first time that these three have read together, so I'm particularly excited. And I actually haven't heard Andres reading before. Although I have read your wonderful works, I'm really, really excited about this. Both Leo and Andres really work with issues around identity, fatherhood, sexuality, and I think we're going to see some really beautiful resonances between the two of them. And then we have the amazing Maia Elsner, who also has Mexican and British roots. Her collection, a debut collection, Overrun by Wild Boars, was recently published by Flipped Eye. It's quite an extraordinary book. It was described as a tour de force by George Surtees, and it's an exploration of multiple identities, languages, and cultures. And it also includes something of her Jewish heritage, which comes out in the way that there is this strength that is found in the face of persecution and trauma. So again, lots and lots of beautiful links of the language and all sorts of images between the three of them. So I'm sure you would much rather hear from them than from me. So I'm going to pass over to the wonderful Andres if he is ready to start.
Thank you, Nat, for that wonderful introduction. So yes, I'm Andres Ordorica. I'm based in Edinburgh. My family originally come from Mexico, but immigrated to the US in the 60s, where I was born, not in the 60s. And yeah, my collection deals a lot with different facets of my own identity. And it goes from childhood until adulthood. So this first poem I'm going to perform is called Photograph. Summer light blinds my mother, 27 with golden ponytail, curls set by that pink can of Aquanet. In her cradled arms, me and my sister, aged 6 and 4, the three of us sit still in an English garden. Rose bushes adorn us as a tree awakens its seasonal blossoms, the sun feeding us its warmth. Proper ladies sniff sprays of begonia while observing our every move. Around us, nature is neatly ordered. We are 3 strangers in that place. We wear shorts and windbreakers, Nike high-top trainers. We always stood out that way, with father and brother directing from the other side of a lens. A photo can tell so much. Mother squinting, sister posing, brother missing, father too, me burrowing deep into the earth. So thank you. My next poem is dedicated to my abuelo, who sadly passed away at the start of this year from COVID. And so, like I said, both of my sides of my family come from Mexico originally, and my mom's side comes from the north in Chihuahua, and my dad's side comes from the south in Guadalajara. So this is for Papa. It was July, which in Chihuahua meant you could fry a huevo on the sidewalk. Copper crimson, my skin was an artifact of my motherland's history. You wore your sombrero, cowboy boots, the leather belt with silver repojado buckle. You were an alondra, belting out corridos from a time gone by, a Mexico that preceded me. Between your honeyed notes, warm timber, I found our definition of love. You showed me a different version of man, offered me a choice between tender and strength. Many called you oso, a tall bear with leathery skin and those beautiful green eyes. But to me, you were Papa, the one who sang like Vicente Fernandez, but hugged like the Holy Father. Through the iron grill, on the other side of a window, I watched you while my cousins played in the dirt. You sang of victory and loss, of a love that stretched out like a telephone cable across all our homelands. In your words, I found myself, and so I hummed along. Love has no need for the cartographer because love has no borders. Love is not a planet, and so it can never be destroyed. Love has no expiration date, and so our love will always exist. Love is a songbird that flies many thousands of miles to find home in the heart of another. Eventually, there was applause for you, for me. As the sun set, the light hit the window pane, causing our two bodies to morph into one. At once, I was the man in the reflection, and you were a little boy singing. Thank you. So this next poem to me really embodies sort of my relationship to being part of the Latinx community and being part of a diaspora. And that sort of, I think, will hopefully resonate with some of you being part of immigrant families and maybe not necessarily living near your grandparents or loved ones. So this is inspired by many conversations I've had with both of my abuelas over the phone. This is called Si Dios quiere. Abuela sits on the other side of a telephone line, sipping café from a Mickey Mouse mug. I'll see you in a month, mamá. Si Dios quiere, mijo. Si Dios quiere. If God wants, they would want me to be obedient, chaste, and ever faithful, to remember to say evening prayers and not eat meat on Lenten Fridays. But if God wants something particular of me, I think they would want me to be a rebozo, threaded by an ancient needle, stretched out above memories that chase me. If God dreams, they would dream me as abuela pins clothes to a line under the mid-morning sun as heat rises off freshly scrubbed terracotta tiles. If God imagines, they would imagine me safely walking hand in hand, languidly under summer clouds as he whispers in my ear, te amo. If God transforms, they would transform me into a brilliant butterfly dancing freely over fresh flowers, roses, hyacinths, marigolds, sipping nectar in a drunken spring days. If God creates, they would create me, a map stretched out over mountains and seas, water blurring the hard ink lines of borders to carry me to places not yet traveled. ¿Estás aquí, mijo? Sí, mamá, I'm here. If God wants, they would want me to exist forever. So abuela always has someone on the other side of an unbreakable line, waiting to greet her like a sun that never sets. All right, so my next two poems, I think kind of sit very well in partnership with each other. And like I said, my debut collection really explores different facets of my identity. So this is definitely veering into queerness, and with that, lust and desire. So this first poem is called Amor. I am going to nurture him like a nopal, make him grow pretty flowers, but remove his spiny needles until he stands tall, until he is fully formed, until I can hold him close. Then I will gather him, take his flower and his fruit, and burn it all until our love is something new. Transform it into tequila, mezcal, until our love is sotol, pulque, thick, racia, crystal clear. Like the drink, our love will be pure. We'll burn our tongues and throats. We'll bring the blues in the morning. All right, so this is my penultimate poem. This one is, definitely inspired, I think, where my mom's family comes from. So this is El Vaquero. He was taller than me, Miller Lite on his breath. The bar thick with heat, amber smoke hung in frame, the floor lined by peanut shells. His Wranglers were so tight that I could see his muscles contracting as we danced. Men and women watched with angry, bloodshot eyes, full of stinging condemnation. But I felt safe in his arms, held firm against his longing, aware of the power I possessed. So this is my last poem that I'll be sharing tonight. So thank you so far for having me. This poem came out of a brilliant workshop or masterclass I did at the start of this year, led by Rachel Long, exploring the art of desire. So this is my take on that. This is 8 synonyms for Vermilion. 1. Vermilion is the strong clavicle of the man at the gym, whose gray eyes watch me while in front of the mirror, convex, flipped inside his dirty mind, his taut chest and razor clam collarbone peeking out of his dirty vest. He stands there imagining what it would be to spot me as I squat deeper into the pain of the weight I shoulder, imagining what it would be to go deeper to its source. 2. Vermilion is a sweaty drag bar at the corner of Zamora and Congress, where I wait to be picked up by a stranger, plucked like the desert flower that I am, thirsty but elegant, ready to be sniffed and then discarded along the highway. 3. It is the color of sashimi and flavor profile of umami, salt of lip, dunked in sodium, raw. 4. It is red-orange Speedos that fit tightly around brown copper quads and muscular bums, with turquoise wet dripping off shaven legs, ready to dive deep inside. 5. It is men from Seville who fuck apathetically, vigorously, languidly, and who take breaks to smoke fags. They call it a siesta, while texting people not currently present in our bed as I watch on naked. 6. Vermilion, a metallic heat like a conductor of electricity, the pigment of childhood, my favorite crayon in the box. 7. It is candles burning in the aisles of TK Maxx, wasting time and smelling indiscriminately, searching for a bargain. I am the Goldilocks of scent and color. 8. It is fire, or perhaps it is desire, which is not a type of flame you can simply strike with a match. It slowly burns until it destroys everything in its way. Thank you.
What an amazing, amazing reading, Andrés. Absolutely beautiful. The way you moved from the sensuality of those last images, which was quite breathtaking, to the tenderness of some of the earlier poems. The way you combine that is just stunning. I am so excited to read your collection. When
Thank
is
you
your
so much.
coming out?
January 2022. So yes, early next year with 4 Ink, who are an amazing Scottish-based publisher who published Nadine Jassett's debut collection. So yes, they've been very wonderful and very supportive.
Fantastic. Well, we'll definitely be putting up information on the Nuevo Sol website, which should be going up very soon. And Andrés will be reading with us again on November 30th live at the Roundhouse. So I'm so excited to hear him read more. That was such a joy to finally hear you read. It's really made my week. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So next we will move on to Leo Boix, amazing British Argentinian poet, who is basically the brains behind Nuevo Sol. I'm not quite sure what my role is, but he's pretty much the thing all by himself. So we will let him read from his absolutely extraordinary collection, Leo Boix.
Oh, thank you so much, Natalie. That was lovely. And thank you, Andrés, for those really beautiful poems. I'm really excited to be here with all of you and to celebrate Latinx British poetry. So it's a real honor to be reading with Maia and Andrés and having Natalie hosting this wonderful event. So I'm going to start my reading with a poem called Gondwanaland, and it's a concrete poem, and in the shape is the shape of South America. Gondwanaland, referring to that supercontinent that existed 180 million years ago. Gondwanaland. You robbed, so bold, you sown from port to port, your dialects and languages, mil lenguas, your soul and skies, you cracked your multiple parts, your beaches and playas, your flores, you killed and taken, you historica and retorica, you tone, you plain baroque, moderna, austere, reclaimed, stained in theatre and tamed. You spilling and pulling and sprouting and tropical, your deserts, your indios, your suns, your dwindling forest and rivers, your cities and buses and serpents and spiders, your ríos, your secrets still hidden, your people, tu gente, tus plantas, your trees, your mountains, montañas, your soil unspoiled, your vast pampas, esteros, your history and blood, your women, their eyes, your hair and dark hands weaving, your drugs and your men, these songs untold, your oh, your oh. My next poem is called Victoria Campo Writes About Meeting Virginia Woolf. And this is a found poem. So it's an actual letter from Victoria to Virginia Woolf. Victoria Campo, the writer and an intellectual from Argentina. She saw an exotic in me. Her curiosity awoke. Something of her eagerness, snoopiness, anything. I took advantage from it, felt her like I was imposter, and I went to discourse with her, the Virginia Woolf. To get close to, she was not an easy person. Was it 1934? My comings from foreign country, rich with much butterflies, that is how she sown Argentina, a detail she found in a book, Travelled by Darwin. I turns me on, very conveniently, to me. I reinforce her, her inquisitiveness. I send to her a collection of butterflies, glassed. To Tavistock Square, her London abides, the majority Brazilian. And I wasn't deceiving her. Whose origins? But South America, such solid block for Europeos. Like standing in front of a children, with eyes fixed on the rattling or the spinning top, I kept her interest, waved her some words, insectos, pumas, parrots, flores, enormous señoritas, my grand abuelas, wrapping mantillas of lace finísimas, Indian chewing, coca living, gauchos with mates, drinking, all resplandecientes, in local color. I surrender to her with a human, animal, and vegetable with such odors of Latin America. My next poem is a visual poem and it's in 3 columns. Autobiography in 3 columns. Born and bred here, you learn a few words. I, us, bed, seabirds, rite of passage through winter, music in black panel rooms, all language lost. Esta casa tan verde, where to sit still, so a little, glue phrases, history. Legless, to talk or diced instead of spiced, semen, chairs. I, more eyes to move words out, never ever, lose emeralds, onyx, nope, arbor, roots, days of, oh, be, or instead, expatriated. Charm for a journey, a mistranslation. And there is an epigraph in Anglo-Saxon. Ik me on pisse gilde beluke and on goddess helde bebeode. With this toad I inscribe a circle and trust to the grace of odd. Against the sore wound, the raw night, the stinking fear, against the swarm of horror none can spare. even sinking into the gland. I sing a victory charm, lift a victory scourge. Worst victory, victory of seeds, let them help now. Let no ocean hinder me, or heated enemy beat me slow. Let faith not hover above my life, but keep me safe, safe. All rivers flow to a call inside me. This came to me on a long-haul flight. Life is way too short, my dad said. I saw him clinging to his orthopedic bed. I could tell a story of a big black butterfly. She came and took father with her. Stars of a southern sky. Here you imagine them going their way, dying, and I didn't notice. All mountains higher than Aconcagua, a condor waits to be conquered, benefactor of my night. This house will survive us. Its black paneled walls, testament of obsessions. Folklore tale. Born before midnight, a jacaranda flower on her head. She was held upside down near a concrete bridge that crossed oily water running from estuary to River Plate. She developed hair, bark, nails, ears. Leaves unfolded quietly. Her penis grew much later, and the branches that turned mossy, hardening as days became hotter. He traveled south to the spot where his parents left him unguarded. Wild dogs nursed him under rows of lemon trees. Developed fruits devoured by bluebirds, mice, flies. His seeds never sent roots down. They expanded horizontally. From there, half woman, half jaybirds appeared. There is a plaque that recounts his life and that of his descendants. It lies hidden under freshly mown English grass. When he dreamt, it was she who spoke to him in another language, from another land. She asked to be remembered as his origin story every time he saw jacarandas ablaze. And I'm going to finish with the title poem, Ballad of a Happy Immigrant. In the beginning, there was a garden and a boy who counted ants, dug for bulbs. All this he enjoyed. Come back a man or never come. Father greased the Peugeot, his blasting radio of 80s techno on. Learn, one day you will need to know. Come back a man or never come. The spaniel dog under the kitchen table, the endless heat, the dusty sparrows on hanging cables. Come back a man or never come. Mother's palm leaf dresses, her sandals. The day she left, they took her things. I lit a candle. Come back a man or never come. Father dressed younger and then remarried. After a loved, sweet wife, he quickly buried. Come back a man or never come. We moved 2 times, from south to north. Some things we took, some we forgot. Come back a man or never come. My sisters shared a fuchsia room. their ploys. I found a corner where I hid my joys. Come back, man, or never come. I went on trains to school and back. At home, the fights, burned steaks, news cracks. Come back, a man, or never come. The night I left, I gave some clues. Look out for me, my ties, my shoes. Come back, a man, or never come. The shared old flat in Naysborough Court, 6 a room, a kitchenette, my home of sorts. Come back, a man, or never come. My lousy English, searched out for words, though found I still could communicate with birds. Come back, a man, or never come. I met very few men, went out to clubs. Some were smarter than others. And one night at the NFT, I met the artist. Come back, a man, or never come. The daily trips to Hampstead Heath, late coffees in Soho, we kissed in Russell Square. A builder shouted, "You too, homos." Come back, a man, or never come. We moved together by the flower market, our tiny flat on Columbia Road. A new life had started. Come back, a man, or never come. Long distance phone calls, dad and his orchids, his health, his lungs, the chats, more morbid. Come back, a man, or never come. I nursed him a week, his bloody coughs, and as he died, my London flight took off. Come back, a man, or never come. By the sea we found some peace. You drew till late. I planted dwarf trees. Come back, a man, or never come. Now I swim and swim, come sun or hail. The sea, my friend, my foe, is holy grail. Come back, a man, or never come. And if they ask, is this your home? I say, well, yes, at least, I hope. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Leo. Absolutely stunning reading. I know that for many of us, that final poem in particular has so much resonance. Come back, a man, or never come. Doesn't matter how many times I hear it, it just goes straight to my heart. And you read a couple of my other favorites. Let faith not hover above my life, but keep me safe. And that marvelous, that repetition of internal rhyme and the repetitions in it, just stunning. So our final poet is the incredible Maia Elsner. Maia is actually currently doing an MFA at Ann Arbor in Michigan. So she is joining us from there. Incredibly accomplished poet and artist. And I'm so excited to have her joining us today and reading from the United States.
Thank you so much, Natalie. You're always so kind. And thank you everyone for being here. Thank you to the London Spanish Book Festival and to La Tundra Revista for having me. And Leo and Andrés, it's such an honor to read alongside both of you. So wonderful to share this space. I'm going to read a poem to begin, which was written for the anniversary of my mum's arrival in the UK, when she had spent 30 years in England, more than half of her life. And she arrived in 1988, which means kind of the Mexico that she remembers, where she was born and when she grew up. The one she passed down to me no longer exists. And this is, of course, very common experience for many of us, that every time we visit, things have changed and even the language itself has changed. So this poem is really about that, about what is lost and what remains, how we change with the years that pass, and also the struggle to hold on. So this is for my mother. Orange juice pressed fresh in memory. This morning, tartar, not quite the sweet enough of home. This early hour, you wonder what the hummingbird says to the heron of its migration. Now, the church is sinking through the torn-up streets of Coyoacán, tree roots displacing concrete, bury deep. At dusk, the jacaranda scent infiltrates colonial walks, cobbles delineate peripheries, and what you were slips out unbidden, with passing years of you still up at 4 a.m., still jet-lagged from your first flight, when just outside a bird begins, with me still wondering what part of you I lose each day to another language, another song. Thank you. When I first started writing poems, something really weird happened, which was basically the Atlantic Ocean kind of turned up right in the middle. And I would want to write about something completely different, the impossibility of saying goodbye to a loved one, or the cyclicality of grief, how it dislocates ourselves from ourselves. But somehow the ocean would always appear unexplained. And there would always be kind of a ship sailing or a plane crossing the waves. And it was only through writing poems that I first began to grapple with how central the ocean has been in my life. I have a huge family, kind of mainly in Mexico City, but also dotted around Mexico. And this poem is about what it is to live and to love someone or many people when the Atlantic is between us. And try every day to understand my mother's loss for like the world that she left, which is also my loss, because wherever I happen to be, it also feels like I leave part of myself behind on the other side of that ocean. And as Natalie said, I'm now in the US, so this question of what it is to cross that ocean again from the other angle, and what it is to have the ocean between you and the people you love feels really important. So this is Guzzle Ocean Water. Today, spilt bucket in the kitchen. No milk, only ocean water and satellite data over which you sit. Salt eyes leak ocean water. In search of salt syllables, I acquire an echo sounder. Expert in bathymetry, find forests on the seafloor, depths of ocean water. In your eyes, only the sea's whiteness, as tendons split apart your deck and cupped hands measure infinity in ocean water. I am conscious of my fingertips, that rivers do meet and the sun repeats its rise and disappearance against the edge of ocean water. Often I tear edges out of sandpaper. In defense of fragments, I piece together printed seams. Ink loosens, thins in ocean water. I thin my bones to fit between the streams of your disrupted sleep. Where you go at night is unimaginable. What part of ocean water? In this forever night, I count color as some count sheep. The field is flooded, and what you think is grass are water snakes in ocean water. I reach to touch your surface, tides ascending skin. In the morning, cold and clouded, I find bite marks on my fins, scars of ocean water. As a little girl, all my knowledge of Mexico came from the songs my mom sang me, the whispers in the middle of the night. It was kind of like she was willing Mexico into our dreams. So the next poem is called Lullaby, and it contains the lyrics of two songs. One is a traditional Mexican song, Cielito Lindo, and the other is a song called Amapola, which was written in the 1920s and then became very popular. And these two songs signaled for me kind of my mum's longing for the world she left behind, a loss that kind of never really went away. And also kind of this poem for me is also about what it is to be disconnected from a parent when you don't speak the same language. And I think about this a lot in relation to intimacy. You know, if Spanish is our language of intimacy, what does it mean to forget slowly or to remember imperfectly, partially? So this is Lullaby. Amapola, lindísima amapola, milk tear falling, falling through. It leaves its trace inscribing tombs. Yo te quiero, in fractured sentences and memorized wounds. Amada, niña mía. Petals satin soft, crumbling into red. You too bled through fingertips. Igual que ama la flor, a luz del día. In the Tijuana summer, even the sun crosses over, is lost to the other side. La luz del día, jutting out, hard steel spike, hard against your te quiero, indifferent waves. Amapola lindísima, you wait for the fogfall, save pennies from a second-hand sale from across the border. In Mexicali, the US wall makes up the fourth of your home. This is the state transnational trade. You sang to me, un par de ojos negros, cielito lindo, de contrabando. Before I lost your language to the streets, my R's all wrong in Spanish, except when I say 3, you taught me, counting pebbles, the tongue-tied sea kisses the edge of drowning, and I'm still waiting at you from the other side. You sang to me, un par de ojos negros, a pair of tangerine wings flecked black, ese lunar que tienes junto a la boca, lips caress as oars divide an ocean. Amada niña mía, no se lo des a nadie. You shut your eyes. They searched you a second time. Amapola. Thank you, everyone. That poem ended at the border, and this book, which is here, does think a lot about migration, kind of both people, but also the stories and objects that are also dislocated because of colonialism, the plundering of the land. But I'm now going to read a poem that is kind of a manifesto for hope, despite all the terrible ways humans have treated each other and continue to treat each other. There remains the possibility for real intimacy and connection. And thank you for this space where I think it's really being adopted. I mentioned the Saber Tree in this poem, which for many communities in Mexico is the tree of life. So roots are thought to connect to the underworld. The trunk represents the middle world where the humans live, and the upper branches are said to connect to the overworld and the 13 levels in which the Mayan heaven is divided. So spirits sit on the branches, and because this poem is really about our interconnectedness and our need for each other as something hopeful, I wanted to share it here. And thanks for everyone who is sharing the space with us. And thanks for Leo, Andrés, and Natalie for all your work, which is so moving to me. And I'm so honored to be in conversation with all of you. Love song for the tightrope walkers. For they rebuild the nests of starling and hummingbird, feed the wolf cub who's lost its mother, afraid of its own shadow. For they too are considered less important when the wind blows unwelcome, stocking supermarket shelves before agreed shifts in cabaret bars. Sammy balances on one hand and strips, takes back tips to his boyfriend, saves some for the sequin girl with the ill grandpa who's short on rent. Each night she unfurls her wings, falls and flies, transforms this audience of skeptics and unbelievers. Do you hear the white river rush from the source, the shuffling cry of morning? I have seen the coral snake outrun its skin, the mangroves soak up the swamp, the saber roots retake each brick and bone the Mayans leave behind. They'll chart a course to sunlight, from maize leaf to lily pad, when you and I have gone to dark. And in that faded starlight, jacaranda, spirits, wake. And finally, I'm going to end with a poem called I Cannot Promise You an Eternity, which is about my great-grandmother, who was a German Jewish lady who escaped the Nazi regime and found refuge in Mexico in the 1930s with her 6-year-old son, my grandfather. She was actually meant to go to Canada, but when the time came for her to flee amid death threats, the boat in the harbor was to Mexico, and so that is how that part of the family arrived. And this poem is about our last meeting just before she died when I went to Mexico and I visited her. I cannot promise you an eternity of love. You sing to me the last time I see you. You are mostly tubes and purple veins. You write and I hold steady your frail fingers clutching the pen. Tell me again of your arrival in Mexico in 1935, of whom you left behind. I ask, does it bother you to be blind? I am stupid and 7 years old. You are concerned by the disappearance of butterflies. I lose the paper message you write. I think on the 12-hour flight back, but I can't be sure. I admit this to my mum on my 24th birthday. Búscalo. Maybe it will turn up somewhere. Someone writes, all lost things end up on the moon. Tell me about the prison in Germany. Tell me so I can record the name you shed so the others wouldn't find you. My friend holds a full moon ritual in which we burn what we wish to forget. You receive a death threat on a Tuesday afternoon. Put it in the third drawer down with all the others, you say. In the last days, you speak only German. None of us understand. In Mexico City, I find someone to translate the words you mumble in sleep. Are there enough butterflies in all the world for all the flowers? Thank you so much, everyone.
What an extraordinary reading, Maia. Every time I listen to Maia, I'm just overwhelmed at this old head, old soul on young shoulders, I think, as they say. Really quite extraordinary. The imagery and just the power of it as well was absolutely beautiful. I really was moved to tears by the last one. So absolutely gorgeous. Just to say also that you can get Maia's book and Leo's book, Waterstones, Amazon, if you want to go to the big giants. If you don't, they are available directly from their publisher, Flipped Eye, for Maia, and for Leo, Chatto. I probably shouldn't be promoting Amazon, should I? Oh dear, never mind. So go to Waterstones or directly to the publisher. So we are now going to pass to the Q&A section. So if my poets can unmute themselves. Yeah, and I'm going to try and look at the Q&A. Okay, so we have the first one from Consuelo. Hola, Consuelo. Love is a Songbird is a wonderful image. It reminds me of Christy Lefter's novel of love, loss, and redemption called Songbirds. Would you say that your poetry is also about loss, for example, of identities, or is it the opposite? I mean, is the sense of loss overcome by writing in Spanglish? Consuelo. And I think that answer is for Andres. I mean, the question Andres, maybe?
Yep. So yeah, I think this is something I've been thinking a lot about, and I think this also has been jarred a bit by Maia's last poem and this idea of like what we might lose, or last few poems, because yeah, like I said, my grandparents, all four of them immigrated to the U.S. in the early 60s. So all of my tias and tios of that generation, their siblings, all grew up in Mexico, and some chose to stay behind and some chose to migrate. And yeah, I think, so like I said, I lost my abuelo at the start of this year, and I have one grandparent on each side. And I'd been thinking a lot about this idea of, when both of them pass, which will happen, it's inevitable, that will be sort of my connection to Mexico will inherently kind of be broken. And so anything going forward, I think, will be up to me to create. My parents grew up as the children of immigrants, are fluent in Spanish, grew up being the ones at like 8 having to do the family admin and translating for my abuelos and stuff. But yeah, I think for me, the idea of the songbird is like this idea of returning, like I can choose to go back to Mexico, or, hopefully when things get even more better after COVID, travel throughout Latin America and experience sort of what does latinidad mean for me. But yeah, I think using Spanglish is a way to overcome that loss. And I think through a lot of my poems, I work through this idea of loss, whether it be interrogating sort of racial identity or immigrant identity or queerness, and having to sort of make a whole of oneself, and how you can do that through language. But yeah, thank you for that brilliant question.
Okay, and we have a question now for Leo, also from Consuelo. So listening to your poetry today, I feel that you're now at an experimental stage where you play not only with written language, but also with structural, visual, and oral verses. I was struck by the generosity of imagery, where history, landscape, people, animals, colors show the abundance of Latin America and what we have to offer other cultures. Fascinating. I'm not sure that's really a question, but was there anything that you wanted to add to that, Leo? Oh, can you unmute yourself?
No, I was saying that that was a really interesting comment from Consuelo, because she picked, rightly, my selection of poems. Today, I decided to read perhaps a few poems are slightly more experimental. I play with visuals. In those poems, there are some concrete poems there, and also poems where I played with syntax. There's a mistranslation. The one that you mentioned is a mistranslation of an Anglo-Saxon poem, and specifically I selected these poems today because I was thinking a lot about language, about syntax, about the way that we play as Latinx poets with language and with imagery and with visuals as well. It's something that I'm really fascinated and interested, and the concrete movement in Latin America, for instance, and I do have many of those concrete poems. So there is a heritage that I'm bringing, not only in terms of the landscape and the imagery, but also formally, as the concrete movement in Brazil and elsewhere in South America. So yeah, thank you so much, Consuelo, for noticing those points. Mm-hmm.
I think there was a question for Maia, but I believe she's had to go class. So I think I will just ask one final question, unless there's something yes. Okay, we've got one from Eduardo de Siqueira. Could all of you talk a bit about writing formal poetry, sonnets, ballads, etc. in a second language? Every time I see Leo Boix read his ballad, it makes me tearful. Yeah, me too, definitely. And I'm actually really interested in the answer, because I remember Leo encouraging you to write in different forms, and you weren't, you had a moment of, there was some fear, I think, and then you kind of jumped into it, and
completely
quite freeing.
Yeah, in fact, you instigated that sort of love for form, and I remember writing poetry in Spanish completely differently from my English poetry. And I wasn't really that much interested in form when I was writing in Spanish. And that's something that always surprises me somehow. Even now, when I write in Spanish, it comes from a different place. Perhaps because I've done many workshops in English, and I had a more formal education in terms of, poetry in English. And also, I had, the wonderful mentors, Mimi Calvati and Pascal Petit, and you, Natalie, and well, Michael Smith, working with him for the complete works. Again, just encouraging me to explore sonnets and ballads and odes and ghazals, so many different forms. And I just realized that there's a history, and I was sort of trying to explore those forms, bringing this kind of new voice, this kind of Latinx voice. So yeah, the ballad is a really good example. It's a song type of form. While I was writing it, I thought this is perfect for a ballad, because there is this kind of almost invocation, this kind of repetition. This line is almost like a estribillo in Spanish. This kind of line that kind of repeats and then you take it with you. It's almost like a song. So yeah, the power of the formal form in poetry. Yeah.
Andres, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I don't know that I can sort of speak so much to it. As I was saying to Nat and Leo earlier in the week, I don't write in Spanish. I've only ever written one poem in Spanish. I do write in Spanglish across poetry and prose, but, I think, yeah, my writing is always, it lives in English and sort of confronting that. And yeah, when it comes to poetic form, I've tried my hand. I'm someone who writes against form. I don't like the constraints of form. I've done, brilliant workshops where I've tried to write like villanelles and stuff. And I think, my brain doesn't work so well in that way. The poets that are able to do that, I'm just so in awe of. But yeah, I think there's a rebellious nature in me that really, I like prose poems. I like sort of inventing new forms, and it also just might be, I'm not educated in a poetic background. I don't, have that language of poetic. So maybe there are poems that if you were to read it, you'd be like, oh no, you're doing this. You just don't realize it. But the way I come into poetry really is just sort of interrogating what other poets do that I like, and then sometimes doing things in homage to them, or sort of just riffing off them. So I do it a lot with like a great Scottish poet who I love, Edwin Morgan. His work is, as a queer man, I love sort of looking at what he did, and he's someone who really played with form, but sort of thinking Latinx writers like Ada Limon, and then other queer writers of color like Dane Smith. But yeah, I think that's an interesting question. Ask me in a few years and we'll see if I get brave enough to start writing in Spanish.
I would say, Andrés, you are using form in English. I can definitely identify some forms. So I think you're probably a lot closer than your rebellious self. Whenever someone says I'm really rebellious, I'm like, actually, you're using this and this. So I suspect in a few years we're going to be seeing a bunch of sonnets and all sorts.
Maybe.
So I just wanted to thank everybody for being here, to thank our poets, Leo, Andrés, and Maia. Just to say as well, you can follow all three of them on Twitter. So Andrés is under Andrés N Ordorica. Leo is very simple. I think it's just Leo Boix. I'm at Nat Teitler, and Maia is also just Maia Elsner. Leo is going to be reading multiple times, all the time. He's got a fantastic event coming up in Manchester. He'll be reading at the South Bank on a Nuevo Sol event on October the 30th. Would love to see you guys there. We're going to be showcasing some new films. And Andrés and Leo will also both be joining me November 30th at the Roundhouse, which is going to be super exciting and also a bit cross arts. So I think that's really all I have to say for the moment. Again, a huge thanks. Please do try and buy their work, or, obviously Andrés isn't quite out yet, but we look forward to it. So that was really beautiful to hear everybody reading and the great questions and comments. So thank you, and thank you to the London Spanish Book and Zine Fair as well for inviting us.